I'm Seth Hilbrand with the KiCad Services Corporation, and today I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming my co-director of the corporation, Wayne Stambaugh, who is also the project lead for the KiCad project. And so welcome, Wayne.
Oh, well, thanks, Seth. I'm really excited to join, and want to just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to join the company. It's really exciting.
Well, we are absolutely thrilled to have you on board. So I think KiCad, under your management, largely here, has kind of developed into this really stable, fast, world-class platform that a lot of businesses I see now starting to use to develop their products in the marketplace. I think that's absolutely fantastic. The level that we've kind of come from and headed toward.
Yeah, it's really easy. It's even caught me by surprise. I mean, I started this with this project a long time ago in like 2005. I think it was 2005, 2006. And between from the very early days when it was pretty much Jean-Pierre Chirac, the project founder, through some of the original move of the project into a platform like
Right.
SourceForge where it could be developed publicly. And then, Dick Hollenbeck was the project leader. I never thought when I started with this way back when that it would ever get to the level that it has. It's really been fascinating to be part of. And I always like to say I don't get really to take that. I shouldn't take very much credit for that, other than I just happen to be the project leader right now, because there was a lot of people that had input to that and contributed a lot. So that's helped get KiCad where it is. And honestly, just looking over the last, I'd say couple years, I mean, it just seems to be accelerating. I don't see it slowing down.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been under active development now for decades.
Oh yeah. It's probably the oldest project nobody ever heard of. I mean, KiCad's been around. I mean, outside of the engineering world, most people aren't going to be familiar with a design product like KiCad. I mean, almost everybody can talk about the Linux kernel and things like OpenOffice or LibreOffice now. So I think KiCad's a little bit obscure in that sense, but yeah, we've been around since '92, and
so we are talking about a project that has successfully transitioned through multiple project leaders, and is still going strong. Still has a community around it that continues to advance and develop it.
Yes, and I think a lot of that is we can thank JP and Dick. Dick for one convincing JP to make it public. Yeah, so you got to give both those gentlemen credit for
Absolutely.
Making that happen, right? Because that really started the development of KiCad into something much bigger. So once it was out there, and then in 2000, I believe I want to say maybe 2008 or 2009, that CERN got involved. And so that gave us a whole new
and that's CERN in Switzerland, the International Research Collaboration.
Yep, the particle collider people. So they brought two part-time paid developers. So now there were 5 developers basically, which expanded the project pretty quickly. We started adding lots of new features. Things started to grow pretty quickly at that point. Then moving on from there, I think CERN, the weight of CERN gave a lot of legitimacy to the project. So people started going, hey, what's CERN?
Right.
Why is CERN suddenly interested in this? So
more people in there with more interest, more large organizational contribution, tells everyone that there's something there to pay attention to and to help contribute to.
And so they also set up our donation system. So now when people donate, and I think that helped a lot because CERN has credibility. People trust CERN as like an independent sort of body to. So yeah, and then probably then we started attending conferences, and like I've been to FOSDEM now the last 5 years in a row. I've given KiCad talks.
Right. And FOSDEM is the developers conference where
Yes,
we
in Brussels,
speak with other open source developers who are engaged in similar activities.
Yes, and then on top of that, this past April, we've actually reached a milestone, and that the project's big enough we actually had our own conference, and so that's significant. Right. We sold out. For those of you who weren't there, the first KeyCon, the first annual KiCad conference, happened in April in Chicago of this year, and it was for the people who were there, I think it was an undeniable success.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, it was very good. So,
well, that's an interesting segue. KeyCon was something of a genesis for this commercial support project, because we spent 3 days talking with all of the KiCad users who came to the conference, or who were able to come to the conference, because as you mentioned, it did sell out. This was a packed hall that we had, and we saw businesses of all sizes that had descended on Chicago to come and learn more about KiCad and to show what they were doing with KiCad. So I don't know about you, Wayne, but I walked away from that saying that there is something that we are able to provide to businesses that really should be nurtured.
Yeah, I think that's the case. I think KeyCon was a bit eye-opening, because I think it was the perfect blend of commercial and community. It really was. It was interesting because you had people giving talks on both sides of that spectrum, right? You had purely commercial people and how they were using KiCad, and then you had the makers and the guys doing the fun stuff with the things they were doing with KiCad. It was really eye-opening.
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the maker stuff and the community-oriented stuff. I'm also privy to some of the business, the commercial stuff that goes on around KiCad, probably a little bit more. But even I was caught off guard by how many people were actually using KiCad commercially. And I think it's good. It's good for the entire project. I mean, I don't see any downside to our user base expanding, anywhere it can expand.
What do you suppose, as we have kind of talked about where KiCad has been and where it kind of is right now, we have one thing that kind of gives some businesses pause, and that's the fact that we're open source. We show our work to everybody. So there are a lot of open source projects out there that kind of come and go. What makes you think that KiCad, as an open source project, is not going to be in the same boat as a project that is, say, volunteer run, fly by night, but kind of loses interest after a while and slowly atrophies? Any chance KiCad's in that boat?
I just don't see there. I think there's so many people using KiCad now commercially. CERN has a vested interest in making sure KiCad makes it, because they're pushing their open hardware initiative and license. I don't know if the reason that a lot of people aren't aware of the reason CERN got involved in the first place is one of their mandates as basically a government. I don't want to say government run, because that's not exactly correct, but
funded by the public.
It's a publicly funded entity.
Yeah.
And one of their mandates is that all the electronics technology that they design needs to be released under an open license mostly for research and, dissemination of the technology into the public. Right.
Right.
And what they realized was they're using commercial tools. They realized how kind of absurd that whole concept was. Here's this great design. I don't know. And if you've ever looked at some of their electronics, they have some really neat stuff. If you haven't, I highly recommend you go look at it. But unfortunately, you have to have a commercial product to view it. Okay. And that was their primary motivator for working on KiCad. Is their goal is to get KiCad to the point where they're going to transfer their entire design department over to KiCad, right?
Right.
So now you have somebody who has a vested interest in seeing it through. So,
Right.
and there are quite a few companies now that will directly take like KiCad board files from board manufacturing, right? There's no need to do the old, generate the Gerber files, zip them up into an archive, and go to some web interface and tell everybody what all these files mean. And it really is. There's quite a bit of commercial infrastructure already built up around KiCad, so I don't see those people losing interest in KiCad because they have a financial interest in keeping and making sure KiCad stays viable.
Right.
And so yeah, I think the chance of the project going away is pretty much zero.
Pretty much zero at this point. Well, I mean, so what about our company, our KiCad Services? Why are we now looking at this as the next step, or an evolutionary step for developing KiCad?
Well, I think you have people in commercial users. It's hard to explain this one. For those of us who are familiar with the community isn't always the best place to go if you're a commercial. If you're just looking for an answer for something, it's not that you can't find it in the community. In fact, the community does a brilliant job of providing good user support, but it also provides a lot of noise with that. If you're a commercial user, you just want to get to the answer, right?
Right.
And so, like, if you go to a forum, you can search the forum and you might find what you want, but you might find a whole lot of stuff that you don't want. And so,
Right.
And so for commercial people, just from a purely commercial perspective, if you're paying somebody to design a board, you really want them to get their answers and get the boards out quickly. You don't want them,
Right.
sloshing through some forum or, trying to look for an answer. Now, sometimes the answer is right there, right at your fingertips. But a lot of times you really have to do some digging to get what you want. So, so for purely support purposes, I think that's good. The other thing too is that I see the KiCad Services Corporation of value that they would add is we have the KiCad project has a roadmap, and developers work on that roadmap as A, time permits, and B, their interest, right? So people have interest. KiCad is still an open source project, so it's kind of when I have an itch that needs scratched and I have time to actually work on something, then I'll do it. KiCad Services will be somewhat of could be an interface to that. Let's say you're a customer that has a project that requires one of the new features that's on the KiCad roadmap, and you want to accelerate that or get that in front of the queue or get development. You're willing to pay a developer to work on that. KiCad Services provides a direct way for you to do that in a commercial avenue. And so that's great for both, it's really great for both the commercial user, right? They have a place they can go where they can say, okay, I need this. And, they can pay somebody to work on it. Because that's directly part of KiCad proper, and it gets merged into the KiCad code base, community benefits from that as well. So there's no real downside to a services to providing services for commercial users.
Couldn't have said that better. I think that we are kind of positioned to give a guaranteed level of support to customers who need it. So you don't need to wonder if your answer is pending behind for other people. If your submitting an issue report or a feature request to the KiCad Services Corporation, then what we're talking about is directly supporting you. I'm going to ask you a little bit of background here, Wayne. Why would people accept your answer or your support as a authoritative answer on the how to accomplish a specific task or fix a specific bug in KiCad?
Well, except for JP and Dick, who no longer works with the project, I probably have the longest history with the project in terms of development. In my previous jobs, I've actually used KiCad in a commercial setting. I'm an electronics engineer by trade. I worked on KiCad because I wanted first of all, I wanted an EDA that worked the way I wanted an EDA to work. And I wanted to contribute something back to the open source community at large. So this was a good way to, KiCad was the perfect way to do that.
Yeah.
I look at KiCad services as a way for commercial users and vendors as a direct interface into the KiCad project without having to delve into the whole world of open source.
But you're an electronics engineer by trade. You've done
Correct.
electronics engineering professionally for a number of years, a number of decades.
Number of decades, yes. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat now. I don't have as many decades as you, but I do have a plural number, and we both kind of come up through that electronics design process. So, I mean, I don't know about you, Wayne, but I speak engineer pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you've been in the business, you know the business, you know people in the business, you know how they work. I mean, I've worked with big and small, big multi-billion-dollar corporations, and I've worked for small mom and pops. So I kind of have a pretty wide view of corporate needs.
Answering technical questions. Do you? A number of companies that everyone offers, so every professional software package offers support in some fashion. So is there anything about you and I providing support directly to the users that sets that apart?
Well, from what I know of most corporate help desks, you don't talk directly to the project leader and two of the lead programmers. You talk to layers, and you have the first layer, and if they can't answer your question, you get dispatched down to the next layer of knowledge. You rarely ever speak directly to somebody who knows exactly what's going on inside the project. So
you end up spending a lot of time trying to talk to someone who can answer your question rather than just getting your question answered.
Yeah. So in the case of us, you and I, we can pretty much directly answer any question. And if not, we know exactly who to ask in the project and get you an answer really quickly. It's not like I don't know who generates every piece of code that goes into KiCad. I do. So if I don't know an exact answer, I know exactly who to get in touch with to get that exact answer. So yeah, it's a fairly short pipe. You're not going to be queued up between 3 or 4 different layers to get what you need.
This brings us to an interesting point of finances and revenue. So how does KiCad Services, this for-profit corporation, how does this fit into a nonprofit organization that is running the open source side? Where's the overlap there?
Well, any development done on behalf of the project for commercial interest will always be rolled back into the project. So in other words, the KiCad Services Corporation exists to continue to move the project along. It just provides revenue to pay developers to work on KiCad. There's always interest, but it allows commercial entities to kind of get their needs met. So right now we're doing a pretty good job, I think, of meeting the community users, the community at large users. But this, I think, for focusing on our commercial users, they probably would feel better if they had a place where they could go commercially rather than, a lot of commercial vendors or commercial users are not comfortable, just donating to a project and hoping that it gets done.
Right. You need some guarantees if you're going to be investing a business's money or time in something.
Yes, and so KiCad Services Corporation provides a vehicle for that to happen.
Yeah.
But everything eventually flows down to the project. So there's always going to be, a net benefit for the project at large.
Right. And net benefits for the project mean benefits for the businesses who use it as well, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's, it's funny as, you hear a lot of people, there's always a fear that, from the community side that the commercial side is going to come in and ruin it, and vice versa. Commercial people are sometimes scared to death of the community because they can be pretty rough. So right. I think KiCad Services Corporation provides a go-between. So, that everybody benefits. I don't think it's a zero-sum game. We can all benefit Absolutely. From each other's contributions, and make the ecosystem around KiCad just that much stronger.
Where do we go from here? Where are we headed? Because we have now this well-established open source project that looks to be continuing for the foreseeable future and beyond. We have kind of an established pipeline of releases of contributors to the project. Now we have this corporate support entity that is building up. So what's KiCad doing now? Where are we focusing?
Yeah, that's interesting. Since we now have a commercial face for KiCad, I think there's some untapped potential there that we haven't probably looked at in the past. I think there's a lot of opportunity besides just purely paid support and paid development. I think there's some really interesting potential, some unlocked potential in working with various vendors such as parts distributors,
right,
board vendors,
right,
turnkey board assembly vendors. I think we work with some of them in the past, but there's potential to kind of integrate what they do into KiCad at large for KiCad to provide access to what services they offer, and then for them to give back to KiCad as a result of that. And I think there's a huge untapped potential there for the project.
So Wayne, where do you see the impact of the open source community, the project that you've been managing and leading for these years? And on the other hand, this commercial entity, where do you see them combining, working together, having some joint sense of mission?
The way I see it is there's a synergy there that as revenue comes in, we can hire people to do things that, pay developers, pay people to write documentation. It takes a lot to run a project like KiCad. So any place where we can, hire people to do the work. I mean, there's some work that's less glamorous and it's hard to get people to work on. So things like documentation, which people underestimate how important that is. We will be able to use that revenue to help pay people full time. Right now, KiCad, the project, is completely almost 100% volunteer. There's a few people that get paid, the two CERN developers. Well, actually, we're down to one CERN developer, but most everybody on the project is volunteer, and they do make a little money on the side with donations. We suspend some of the donation money from CERN that's donated on behalf of the project, but that's not really enough to pay people to do the continuous work that it's actually required to,
Right.
take KiCad to the next level. You do need, if you think about, like projects like the Linux kernel or LibreOffice, they have big foundations. Most of them have paid full-time staff to either run the project or do the project management stuff, or to pay people to do the things that the volunteers aren't interested in working on. So, the KiCad Services Corporation will allow for that kind of thing to happen. And that's, that does nothing but benefit the project at large.
Right. So now we're kind of focusing on KiCad Services. We're focusing on supporting our user base right now. And in 5.1, we're focused on continuing to deliver those development items for version 6, our next version. So I think we're going to see a lot of businesses starting to develop interest that maybe have been not looking at KiCad in the past.
Yes, I think going forward, we're going to see, I think commercial interest is going to continue to increase. I have an opportunity to talk to quite a few board vendors who support KiCad both directly and, through the traditional Gerber file type ordering. And what's interesting is, of the handful that I have direct contact with, 3 or 4 years ago, we were just KiCad represented a couple percent of their total orders, which was, basically noise. I'm seeing numbers as high as 25% for some board vendors.
Right.
And I'm hearing numbers between like 15, 20%. And if that's just the board vendors that I know about, I'm sure there are board vendors that I'm not aware of that are probably seeing similar type growth. So that tells me that when I hear numbers like that, I don't think that is just the hobby and maker community. I don't see how that kind of user base doesn't get attention from people who aren't using it.
Without a doubt, and everyone gets to see what the project is capable of, where it's going, and the speed. I would say the speed at which it is adding features on features and coming into parity with a number of commercial options. I really expect that to continue, and with additional business support, accelerate.
I agree. I think probably after version 6 is released, I think the feature parity gap with a lot of products is going to be small enough that, for a very large percentage of the EDA user base, there won't be a real compelling reason to not use KiCad.
Well, Wayne, I've really appreciated your coming on board. We are absolutely thrilled to have you, and we're going to keep this project moving. And if anyone has any questions for you, do you have an email address that they can contact you?
You sure can. You can catch me at wayne@keypro-pcb.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Wayne. We'll be in close contact.
Yes, we will. I'm looking forward to this to see where it goes.